Okay, and just so you can mentally prepare for next spring, uh, the senior seminar presentations are going to be required in all of my classes. So I'll release the dates at the very beginning of the class so you can um, make arrangements. But we had crappy turnout, so rather than giving extra credit, I'll just take away credit if you don't come. So, so that's just the way it's going to be. Okay, so final exam is going to be Wednesday at 10 a.m. It's you have 2 hours to take it. It's going to be designed to be the same length as the midterm. So designed to fit into a 50-minute period. You have the full 2 hours to take it. It shouldn't take you that long, but it's yours if you want it. There will be approximately 6 programming questions, 4 non-programming. Out of the non-programming questions, there will be at least 1 conversion question. That could fall into the category of convert between one number base to another number base, between base 2 and base 36. Or it could be a capacity conversion, gigabits to terabytes, something like that. So that's that chart where you have 8 bits is equal to 1 byte, so it's a multiplier of 8 to go across columns, and then it's multipliers by 1024 to go up and down the column. Okay, so at least one of those, possibility of one of each of those, that should be free points. The programming questions will range from like write a function that does something to maybe write a couple of lines of code to accomplish something. There will more than likely be a question on, create a class that represents something. So for example, we've been looking at like our player class in here, or our wizard class, where we have these attributes of that guy. So for instance, if I ask you to make like a person class where a person has maybe a name, an age, and a gender, something like that, you should be able to create that class. And then maybe I might ask you to create a function that displays who, what that person is. Like, hi, my name is whatever my name is, and my age is something or other. Yeah.
Is there a place we will be meeting, or is this like an online thing?
I'll be here.
Okay.
Yep, right in class here. At least that's the current plan. It's easier to grade the online exams, but it's that I also have to rely on technology a little bit. So let me think about that, but the plan is to meet here. Okay. So, let's see. Let me go back through. Let's look at our notes prior or post midterm, and I'll kind of mention the things that I think are pretty important. So highlight the things that you would behoove you to spend some extra time studying, and maybe the things that are less maybe critical or something. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to cover that too. Let's do the midterm will primarily be what we've done since the midterm, or the final will be primarily what we've done since the midterm. But it's a cumulative exam. So, for instance, we did for loops before the midterm. You should know how to write a for loop for this exam. All right, so I'm going to highlight the things that we've done more recently that I think are highly likely to be represented on the exam, and then we'll swing back to the slides earlier in the semester, and I'll point out the things that are maybe extra important that either weren't represented on the midterm, or people didn't do well on it in the midterm, stuff like that. Sound good? All right. Out of curiosity, just asking the class in general, would you prefer a to take the exam in here, or would you prefer to do it online? Is that because you don't want to have to wake up in the morning, or is it more convenient to type the stuff? I mean, it's not till 10 a.m. It'd be different if you were a 7:30 a.m. final.
It depends what you do during the night.
Wait a minute.
So like 4 a.m. Minecraft.
Do I ask for clarification? What's this?
4 a.m. Minecraft sesh with the boys. We gotta grind on.
You're playing Minecraft?
Hell yeah, I play Minecraft. You wanna see our server?
Grinding that Minecraft.
We have a dynamic map on Google. Like we have we
I thought Minecraft is a children's game.
No.
What?
It gets pretty wild.
Come on.
It gets pretty wild.
Okay, so this is what you have to help me understand. This is what you have to help me understand. I know Minecraft is incredibly popular, right?
Hell yeah.
I don't get it. Help me understand why it's so popular, because there really isn't a goal.
It's just more fun to play. It's fun to play with your It's way more fun.
But what does it mean to play? You're just building. It's like
surviving.
it's like adult Legos.
We make a house, we find diamonds, we kill monsters, you know, I have a horse.
I mean,
like,
there is an end to the game. Yeah. Like the game has an ending. It's to get into the end and kill the end dragon.
Okay, but
And then that's
but
it.
I didn't think people actually like tried to do that. I thought everybody's just
That's what grinding Minecraft is. Grinding to get to that because then you get to unlock the secret credits.
secret credits.
Well, I don't really think that.
I mean, I thought it's just Legos.
Well, me and one of my friends in high school, we ground it down. We did it in like a day and a half. We started on a regular survival role. We beat the game in like a day and a half. We stayed up all night.
All right, so it is a children's game.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
No.
well, children and older.
And
And
the end of counts.
All right, so let me think about that. I'll make a decision by the end of today. If you haven't heard from me by, let's say, like 11 p.m., somebody messaged me on Slack. I mean, on one hand, I prefer to grade them online. It's easier, but on the other hand, I don't want somebody like not take the exam because some sort of technology error. All right, let me think about it. Go ahead.
If we do it online, is it still going to be due like in the usual class time?
What I would probably do is I would probably just put it up over the weekend sometime and then say you have 2 hours to take it. You got to take it all at once, and I need it in by midnight Friday or something like that. So it's easier? Are we accepting bribes for this? Like, what we start pooling? You have a what?
I have a
Qdoba gift card. I do like meal swipes. Now, meal swipes are beneficial to faculty members at the end of the semester.
Yeah, we have like.
I can't really accept money. I think that would be, but if it was like you were going to lose them if you didn't use them type meal swipe type situation. If you happen to tell Gretchen I'm swiping Dr. Littman in for a meal next week.
Gretchen's really chill. She'll let you do it.
Yeah, well, should I pause this? Hold on. All right.
I'll give you over 100 bagels.
100 bagels?
Over.
Yeah, okay, so you realize I'm low carb.
Never mind.
Okay, so that was basically a threat of my life. I ate a burrito at Highland House yesterday. I'm still paying for it.
Which one?
I did like the Mucho King burrito or whatever, but I took my carb pills. I don't think that was good. That didn't help. It's supposed to block complex carbohydrate, but I think it blocks like a small percentage. I don't think you're supposed to eat something that's pure carbohydrates. Yeah, it's didn't go well. All right, so let me consider that because it is easier for me to grade than I don't have to keep track of all this paper. All right, let me think about it. I might make a decision about the end of class. Okay, so starting post-midterm, things you should focus on, definitely lists. Several of the programming questions are going to involve filling lists up with things, going through a list and doing something to the buckets, adding up the values that are in there, looking for the smallest number, looking for the largest number, that kind of stuff. right? I might say write a function that takes the list as a parameter and returns the smallest number in the list, or returns the average value in the list, where you add up all the values, divide it by the length of the list, that kind of thing. So there will be at least one, probably at least two programming questions that involve lists, and it could be more. Okay, pretty important thing. So I would say lists are to the final exam as strings were to the midterm. Okay, these are two pretty important concepts. There will very likely be something with strings in one of the programming questions as well, but lists are going to be kind of our highlight, along with dictionaries. All right, so lists definitely on there. Potentially a non-programming question could deal with the difference between arrays and lists, but I wouldn't call that super high priority. I'm kind of thinking the non-programming questions might deal more with kind of inheritance. Some of the stuff we've maybe dealt with a little bit more recently, where we haven't had tons of homework to practice it. I want to see what you've learned this semester, and if we've only introduced something in like the last week or two, and we haven't had a whole bunch of homework assignments where it built on it, I probably would not necessarily throw that into a programming question unless it was a really simple concept. So I doubt I'll ask you to kind of create kind of a hierarchy type of situation programmatically, but I might give you something like that and ask you questions about it. So you should be able to read code, and I would call those questions reading code, non-programming questions. Make sense? All right. Certainly variable passing, the idea of when you pass a list, for example, to a function and you change it, it's a permanent change. A lot of times I cover that in, it's a little bit more obvious to cover that in like Java. Being a strongly typed language, you can see it a little clearer. So I might be, this would probably fall into the category of a non-programming question rather than me having you write something that really relied on you fully understanding that concept. So you should understand it at the high level, but maybe not at the super confident level. Somebody passes a list, something changes, and that's a permanent change, and that has drastic impact someplace else. You should understand that, but it'll really get drilled into your soul next semester. So know this slide, but know it at the academic level. Be able to work with random number generator. I might have you write a function like fills a list with random integers between 1 and 20, something like that. So be able to use that function. Be familiar with a split function. I don't know if I would ask you to do something with it, but that would be fair game for one of the programming questions. Splitting a string up into a list and then doing something with it. The in keyword, writing loops that deal with something being in a collection, or using it as a Boolean to find out whether a certain value exists in a collection. So I would say there's a reasonable chance one of the programming questions might require you, or at the very least, it might benefit you to use the in keyword. As we've seen here, there's many of your solutions you come up with for your homework assignments may not be like the solution I write in class. So there might be some alternate ways of writing it, and you could always, if you forgot about the in keyword, you could always write your own helper function that returns true if it's in there and false if it's not, and just write it. So you wouldn't lose points if you didn't use the in keyword for something. I wouldn't require it, but it might be beneficial to be comfortable with that guy for answering one of the programming questions. It might be a little easier if you knew that. Loops, do while loops certainly not, since it's kind of weirdly represented in Python, but for loops are kind of our go-to thing, but you should also be familiar with the while loop, but my gut feeling is you could probably survive without writing a while loop on the exam. A lot of the things we're going to be doing at this level are going to deal with going through every element of a string or a list or something like that. And a lot of times we just know how many times we're going to go through, which lends itself to a for loop. But I would say while loops would be fair game. Dictionaries, I would put them at a slightly lower importance than lists in terms of programming for the exam, but definitely very, very important in the big scheme of things. And will be on the exam. Well, at least one of the programming questions will deal with a dictionary. All right, so be comfortable working with those, the name value pair stuff, being able to look up keys. Go ahead.
Would that be like writing with a dictionary, or like understanding what a dictionary is when you're interpreting a function?
Let's say yes. I could ask you to take in a list of 2 lists and fill a dictionary where the keys are the values from one of the lists and the values are the values from the other list. So you should be able to write code with it. Yeah. And something for those of you who went to a lot of the senior seminar presentations, you saw this idea of JSON pop up pretty often. This is how modern computer science works. In the 250 class next semester, we're going to be talking to RESTful APIs using Java. The fact that we're using Java is inconsequential. The point is like, we might ask Yelp for a collection of the restaurants that are in the Mequon area. In fact, I think do I have Postman open here? Yeah. So here's an example of a Yelp call. This is JSON representation of all the restaurants in the Mequon area. This is a response from Yelp if we make a call to their API. And it's all in JSON, which looks a lot like a dictionary. Okay, so understanding that format, working with that format, that's what you're going to be doing as your job in a computer science world today, writing software, digesting data from other places, because why should you have to go collect information about restaurants nearby when Yelp has already done that? That's their business. You might as well be able to digest that. All right, so yeah, this idea of JSON and its relationship to dictionaries is important. I probably won't focus very much on JSON in here because we'll have plenty of focus on it in other classes, but definitely dictionaries are kind of our, dictionaries were influenced heavily by JSON. They're effectively a collection of name value pairs. The pop and get functions for getting keys. So this adds or this removes things from a dictionary. You should be able to use those. I don't know if I'd write a programming question that would require you to use those. But it's possible I would give you a non-programming question or ask you to read code that uses pop and get. And it's not because those functions are hard, it's more to do with it might be hard to come up with something that's kind of exam appropriate that uses pop and get for doing something. It might just kind of be a weird question, so I might not ask it, but I could write some code that uses it and just say, what does this do? The none keyword, you should be comfortable with that. I don't know that I'll necessarily test on it. Again, kind of weird to come up with a programming question that's really going to leverage that, and I probably wouldn't ask you a non-programming question because it's kind of an easy concept. All right, definitely objects will be on there. Like I said, at least one of the programming questions is going to say, here's something in real life like a person or a car that maybe has a number of passengers and a number of wheels and engine size or something like that. Write an object that has those fields, has a appropriate constructor, and then maybe has a display function that outputs some sort of reasonable, maybe an F string, dealing with the what that car is like. I'm a Chevy Bolt, whatever it is, and I have a 1 horsepower engine and whatever else it has. And 4 wheels. So some output like that, but be able to write an object, be able to use objects. It would be fair game for me to provide for you on the exam a collection of objects. Like here's some pre-made objects, and I might ask questions that ask you to use those objects as part of your solution. So be able to do that similar to how we've been working with ninjas and warriors and or wizards and melee people, whatever. Okay, all those underscore methods, be familiar with those. The most important is the init method. That's your constructor. I mean, that's 100% you should be comfortable with constructors. When I ask you a question to write a class, you will be asked to write an appropriate constructor for that class. All right, so no excuse for being surprised by underscore init. I'm telling you what will be on the exam. Underscore str possibly could be on the exam as well. I would call that kind of the second most important one. You know, that gives you that string representation for an object, where if you just print an object out, you get the weird memory addressy looking thing. But if you override the underscore str underscore method, it gives you something better than the memory address, or at least gives you the opportunity to make it better than that. So I could see that possibly being represented on the exam. I probably will not ask you about like overriding like the less than or greater than and all those things. Important information if you ever need to write an object that deals with that stuff, but probably won't be represented on the exam. All right, but definitely constructors, I would review the underscore string thing. So that's that guy. Yeah, so these guys, important to put in your data bank somewhere, but I won't ask about them on the exam. Understand that whole is-a relationship thing. You know, if I create 3 ninja objects, each one of those is an individual instance of the ninja objects. Those are 3 different ninjas, okay? Not clones of each other that are actually the identical memory address. They live in different places of memory, and they have their own hit points and their own speed or whatever we may put in ninjas. The isInstance function, that could come into play somewhere. I might have a programming question that maybe gives you a list of objects and maybe has you count how many of each of them there are, similar to what we did with like the coins. Remember that? Okay, so that would be fair game. That's in the ballpark of the types of questions I like to ask. Again, with this whole inheritance thing, it would probably come more in the form of one of the non-programming questions, or if I gave you some classes, it would be fair game for me to give you, you know, a class called coin, and then a class called US coin, and then 4 classes called quarter, dime, nickel, penny, and you should be able to use those appropriately. You should understand the concept of inheritance, but I probably wouldn't ask you to write code related to inheritance. Not really because it's hard, but more because it's hard to maybe come up with a question that would be of the appropriate length for an exam dealing with that. Because as you saw from the homework assignment, it's kind of like tedious repetitiveness. You know, it's not that it's bad, but I'm not really testing a concept other than your ability to not write syntax errors over 80 lines of code or something like that. I won't ask about abstract classes. We cover that heavily next semester, and it only sort of kind of makes sense in Python just because it's a loosely typed language. But remember, it's the idea of like, hey, I'm going to have a class that I don't intend to create instances of. So like back here, coin would be an abstract class, US coin would be an abstract class. Because we only actually are going to create quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. You know, just like in our game recently, you know, you're never going to actually have a generic magic user. You would have wizards and necromancers. Those are the things that would actually exist, but they're built on top of an abstract class. But Python doesn't have a syntax for it. Go ahead.
Object would also, the object class would also be an abstract class, right?
Technically it is, but we didn't write this.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why it's in red here. So it would become a lot more obvious in Java, being a strongly typed language. We'll actually put the word abstract there. which says you can't make an instance of this guy. It will prevent you from doing it. We're here. If we wanted to make a coin, we can make a coin. It's useless. It maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense in your problem solving, but if you really want a generic coin, you can make a generic coin. And you could do it in Java too. You could just prevent yourself from doing it by making that class abstract. Okay, and this is kind of where we got to our more recent stuff. Definitely understand that idea of calling your parents constructor, where your parents constructor can do some initial setup for you, and then you do some additional setup. So maybe inside of your own constructor, like a ninja setting his speed in his own constructor, but maybe he relies on his parent, who was melee user or something like that, to do some of the initial setup. So he calls that constructor first to give him some of his variables, and then he further differentiates himself. So calling your parent's constructor is an important thing. And as I put here, good programming practice says that you should put that first. Let your parent create you the best they can, then you can differentiate yourselves. In Java and C#, if you're going to call your parent's constructor, it's enforced that it has to come first. Python, I think we tested it, and you technically don't have to call it first. It can be anywhere in there that you want. Okay, so that's the stuff post midterm. Let's just jump back to the beginning here. Oh my gosh, how many slides do we have? Definitely binary stuff, because I might ask you conversion questions, so be comfortable with all the bases. It would be completely fair game for me to say convert a base 13 number to a base 17 number. So you should understand that generic pattern of converting between various bases, or convert decimal. Remember our two patterns: decimal to a base. You keep dividing by that base, recording the remainder, and you go from a base to decimal. You have your ones place, your power to the ones place, the power to the twos place, the power to the threes place, so on and so forth. Oh, for those of you who were at the tech conference the other day, we had somebody talk about the cost of memory, and it was I think it was the keynote speaker who was talking about that, how much stuff has changed. Here's an example of a conversion question for sizes, so be able to do those. Obviously, be able to create Boolean expressions. That's going to be part of your ability to ask questions with an if statement. I promise you'll have to write if statements. You'll have to create variables. You'll have to write loops. Be able to operate with strings using concatenation. It's entirely possible. You'll have to glue strings together, build a string. I throw onto this, and I mentioned it earlier, but I might ask you to use an F string on the exam. We've done that in class many times, and it's a convenient way of doing it. I don't know that the book covers it. I don't remember. Does the book cover F strings or not? But regardless, I might not ask a question that says write an F string that does something, but I would encourage you to learn F strings, and it'll make your answer to display functions for something go smoother. Be able to write F strings. Be able to use our conversion tools to turn an int into a a string and turn a string into an int using the int function. The length function as well for a collection tells you the number of things that are in it. So we use that same function for lists. We also use it for dictionaries. We also use it for dictionaries. It gives us the number of keys, right? But typically, if we're going to loop through a dictionary, what keyword do we use instead of the length? If we want to go through every key of a dictionary, what keyword would be pretty important for that loop? Well, that's the kind of loop we'd use. Okay. Pick that one out of Minecraft.
I don't know if they have portals in Minecraft.
I'm pretty sure you can accomplish it because didn't somebody build a primitive computer using Minecraft?
Yeah, people put like iPhones in Minecraft.
Yeah, but that's not the kind of Minecraft you play.
Nah, I just like.
You build dungeons and castles and sandboxes and
My farm. Don't forget my farm.
you have a farm.
Actually, we have a.
Like more like children's playground stuff.
Well, I mean, for the most part, but you know.
He keeps like saying, "You're digging yourself a hole, dude." So is this like a throwdown? Is there like a competition between servers? Does that even exist? It does exist?
In some cases, people can make money out of it.
So is this like in the movies, like a dance-off?
People actually make money out of it.
All right, shut up! Let's keep trucking through this. So we have our length for different things. The question I asked about going through all the keys of a dictionary, use the in keyword, right? For keys in dictionary type, you can go through, you'll get each key, and then you can ask for the value within that. And the book has plenty of examples of looping through key value pairs in a dictionary. Be comfortable with range. Again, this is something you've been doing for a while. If you're going through a loop between 0 and 10 for I in range 0 to 10, and then you can step by 1, you can step by 2 if you want to take hops of 2, whatever it is. Be able to write functions. Scoping rules, I probably won't ask you something very specific about that. That's a lot easier to teach specifically in Java, just given that it's strongly typed. So understand that variables are only accessible in certain places. And if you want to get a value out of a variable, you need to A, have access to the variable, and B, it should have a value. Outside of that, I probably won't test you on the rules too much for this. Be able to use the find tool. It's possible that will be something that might benefit you on the one of the programming questions. But like I said, you could always write your own function that does it. If you forgot how it works, or you forgot that it was there, and you need to search through a string for something, nothing keeps you from just writing your own function that searches through a string for some given parameter. All right, I'm not going to take off for you building your own tool to do it rather than a built-in tool. Yeah. Yeah, it gives you the position of the first one. I don't think with the default find, but you can certainly write your own version of find that does that, which maybe returns a list of the positions. Yeah, so I mean, so the answer is yes, there is a way. I don't know if there's one built in, but it wouldn't be an incredibly hard. In fact, a question like that would be a pretty good, that would be like one of the good programming questions. It was not. You just append it onto the list. Every time you find one, you append the position onto a list. Return the list in the end. So that's a pretty easy question. All right, and this is our solution to the midterm. All right, so anything that you want me to review or go over for anything before the midterm, go ahead.
I know just with like the inheritance thing, there were times when we were referring to higher levels of it, and sometimes we had to use self between the parentheses, and sometimes we didn't, and I'm not quite sure I understand when we need to use self.
Okay. Yeah, so it's if we go outside of this guy, so like take damage. So we have a ninja that knows how to take some damage. So he has a function called take damage, right? Now, if we go up and look at that function, we'll see that it does take in self. Okay, so we'll go to ninja. Oh, here's ninja. Here's take damage. This guy takes in two parameters. Self, which is how Python implements inheritance, and how Python implements object-orientedness, actually, and then the damage it takes. Now, if we're outside of the class hierarchy, we're using the objects. When we call that function, we're only passing the amount of damage, not passing self. We don't have a variable called self out here. Self is how an object refers to itself from within itself. Now, we did have examples, and this kind of goes to what I think the other part of what you're asking is, there were some times where we did pass self. And those were the situations where we asked our parent to do something. So, for instance, as a ninja, I can get damage from a melee user. Okay, that is the melee user version of myself. Okay, so now I'm within the inheritance model. So a ninja is going to call upon his melee user parent, call his get damage function, and going to pass along a pointer to himself. That way they can access like his energy and his speed if they needed those things. So in that particular case, if we go up to melee user, here's get damage. This guy takes in self when something that inherits from warrior, not warrior, melee user, right? Melee user, get damage takes in self when something inherits from melee user like a ninja. If he wants to call the melee user version of this, he would have to pass along a pointer to himself because that's what's actually being operated on. That makes sense? Similarly here, we see that now we're calling the person's get damage, and then we're augmenting that with a little bit more damage. So we're also passing along self there as well. Okay, so we're kind of saying, hey, give me some damage. Here's a walkie-talkie that lets you talk to me. And then he's calling up to the guy above him, hey, here's get damage. Here's a walkie-talkie the way for you to talk to me. Because if we are inside of, for instance, a melee user, if we're inside of get damage, a variable always resolves to its most local definition. So before this line, if I were to say self dot energy, let's say, actually it didn't matter if it was before that line or whatever, this variable right here, self, will resolve to whatever this guy is. But if that guy wasn't there, self would refer to this instance of melee user. Or in this case, I want him to refer to this instance of whatever he is. In our example here, it was a ninja.
Okay, so could you then within that class do get damage without self and then it would refer to the energy within melee user?
Could we write this without,
Yeah.
I think it's a good question. Can we do it? I think the answer would be yes, we could write it, but I don't think that the child would get it.
So it would be limited to that class, it couldn't pass it on.
Correct. But even that's a weird... I actually think it might give an error. I think we might not be able to do it. Even though, based on how you might explain self being what supports the inheritance model, it might be a forced syntax. Okay, so let's go and call... when we call it, let's pass it one less parameter from our... So we'll not pass itself there. will not pass itself there. Will not pass itself there, not pass itself there. Yeah. So legally it'll let you write it that way, but then it says he gets his personality, he gets his selfness from the variable that was passed in. So because, let me just undo this for all those. Because when our instance of melee user was not created using this constructor, we never got a variable called self. Therefore, in order for us to have that variable inside of get damage, in the situation where it's one of our children calling it, they had to pass that variable in so we had access to the pointer of the object that was calling this. So we can write it without this, but we can never use it. Because the second this guy, we could actually probably, if we didn't refer to self in here, we could do it. Then it would definitely work then. So if I return just a 7 here, let's say, and I just commented the rest of that out, that's for melee user, then we go back and we, oh, that's for magic user. That's this, that's this, this, this. I think this will work because we're not actually using self at the next level up. So even though, so we didn't pass it in, but we also didn't try to use it. Okay, so up here, a ninja is getting its damage from the melee, his melee userness up here at the melee user level, right here. Get damage is just returning a 7. But if we say instead that we want to return get damage from person passing ourself in, it's going to yell and say, I don't know about a variable called self. It didn't get created inside of melee users in it because you didn't create a melee user, you created a ninja, and you didn't pass me anything. So I never had it. So there's our error. Okay. Well, fix that in a second. Other questions you want me to cover, review, blah, blah, blah? Go ahead.
So the split function,
Mm-hmm.
it turns a string into a list. Is that what it is?
Turns a string with elements separated by spaces into a list. I think there's also a second version of split where you can tell it the delimiters you want it to split on, but the default split says if you gave it a list that's like ABC space XYZ and you split on that, you get a list with 2 elements in it. The first element would be ABC, the second element would be XYZ. What else? Yep.
So if you wanted to like assort a list, for instance, you would use like the list on sort, like.
Yeah, I mean, if if you were sorting, if you just needed a list to be sorted, you could use the sort function of lists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think it's list.sort. I think the sort function for list is just sort, you pass the list to it.
Okay.
Not positive, I'm pretty sure it's what it is.
Okay.
That would be consistent with how the length function works. If you want the length of a collection, you say len, pass it a collection, it gives you its length. If you wanted to sort a collection, you would pass it a collection and called sort, pass it a collection, it would give you that collection sorted. If I remember correctly though, we tested it and it returns a list that is sorted, doesn't actually permanently change that list if I remember correctly. So I would have to say like new list is equal to the sort of old list, because after that line of code, old list is still its unsorted self. new list has its sorted version. So it has more to do whether it permanently changes it or just gives it to you once as a sorted version.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Go ahead.
And then the underscore underscore str underscore underscore function that basically just returns a value. If you have
Returns a string, and that is the string that would display if you were to print an instance of that object.
Okay.
The default one of those shows like the crazy memory address thingy.
So when you're going to be asking us to display things in this final, we should again still be mindful of print versus return, right?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're displaying something versus returning something, definitely. Yeah.
So display would like default mean print unless you say return.
Correct. Yep. But as he just said, if you were accomplishing display by using the underscore underscore str function, that underscore underscore str function, his job is to return a string. If we say print a ninja, let's say we have an instance of a ninja. If we just say that, print a ninja, it's going to call a ninja's underscore underscore str function, which returns a string. So it's not the underscore underscore str that's printing, it's the print function that's printing, and it's printing the string that was returned by the underscore underscore str function.
But would that still qualify as display since it does print something?
It would be displaying at the time that you were printing it. So you kind of have both examples there. str returns, and then your display function, if you wrote it in terms of your str function, you would say print, inside of display, you would say print self underscore underscore str underscore underscore. Whatever that guy returned. All right, anything else? All right, so do we make a decision about this exam? Do we want it online? That's what we want?
I would like
I should just do it back. I should see how many private messages I get for meal swipes for next week and base it completely off of that.
Yeah, you can have 15 next week.
All right, we'll do it. We'll do it online. I'll put it up. I'll say it'll be up by midnight Sunday, but I'm probably going to try to get it up prior to that. But I'll just say it'll be up by then, and then you just need to complete it in one sitting, but you need to complete it by, call it midnight Friday, because I'll be grading over the weekend. I have to have grades in, I think, Tuesday. Sound good? All right, so then I guess I won't see you next week, next week at the time of the exam, but I am around. I'll be on campus using your meal swipes. All right, I will see you when I see you. And make sure you practice programming over break. Don't show up to the 250 class next semester forgetting everything you learned, because we're going to be hitting the ground running pretty quick.